can we talk about the random ass pile of candy that was placed in this movie to justify the fucking name? I want to take a moment to just acknowledge the fact that the only reason that pile of candies with razor blades in it is A, because that was the height of the, oh my god, strangers are putting razors in. Nobody's giving away good razor blades to kids and candy. No, they're not. It's the same thing as like, oh, they're gonna sell weed to the kid. No one's just giving away their weed to the no. Hey everybody, my name is Jon.
I'm Bob. He's Bi.
They're Butch.
And together we are the Butch and the Bi.
This is not that podcast anymore. It is that podcast, but it's not that podcast. Anyways, you may notice if you're watching the video version of this podcast, which if you aren't, you should go subscribe to our YouTube real quick. You may notice a beautiful baby boy standing next to me. No, he's not standing. Sorry, he's just really tall. It's Brian Adams.
Thank you. I did not anticipate being introduced that way.
Oh, don't worry. I'll always find new fun ways to introduce you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we also had a good time watching a tale of just, I have that black friend. Bob, what tale did we watch?
A tale of places you don't want to find bees.
A tale of dressing up like cops.
Oh my god.
Does Brian have one?
I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything.
Much like the main character in this movie.
Yeah.
A tale of infant abduction by supernatural forces.
The tale of infidelity.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly.
That's a big part of it. We had a good time watching Candyman, originally released in 1992. This is not the remake that came out last year. Requel, reboot, whatever they're calling it these days. Damn kids and their new movie language. I hate it. And this was directed by Bernard Rose. It was written by Bernard Rose, and it's based off of Clive Barker's The Forbidden. And I kept waiting for it to feel like a Clive Barker movie, and then it got there. It got there real quick. It got there real fast. This movie stars Virginia Madsen as the main character, and then my phone's gonna auto scroll away from everyone else. Xander Berkeley, who I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, this guy looks really familiar. What do I know him from? The CW back in the era 2009-ish era had a TV remake of La Femme Nikita, and Xander Berkeley played the director of the spy agency thing. And he's in that. He's also in The Walking Dead, I believe, for 2 seasons. We also have the iconic, the legendary Tony Todd in this movie, which here's the thing. My introduction to Tony Todd was not this movie. It was the Final Destination movies.
Oh.
He plays a reoccurring character in those movies, believe it or not. And he's great in them. And similarly is kind of this looming threat presence in the movie, similar to this one.
Mm-hmm.
I've also met him twice, and he's great. He's swell. We'll talk about that later. It also stars Cassie Lemons and Vanessa Williams. Dejuan guy or Dejuan guy? I don't know. How do we feel about that pronunciation, gang?
Dejuan? Yeah.
Right?
Dejuan.
Okay. Dejuan. There we go. And some other people. They did things. It's great. Brian, we asked you to pick a movie, and you picked this one. Why'd you pick this movie?
I see it as one of the greatest horror films of all time. They're definitely it's up there with Freddy, Jason, that kind of thing. To me, I forget if one of our friends posted something that had
Jeremiah posting about the national turning Mount Rushmore from the colonialist propaganda it already is into horror movie propaganda, which we stand that choice. Who was on that? Bob, did you see that post?
Yeah, I think it was Michael, Freddy, and Jason.
And then there was a fourth thought.
Yeah.
I think Ghostface, because I'm biased, and that's multiple people really. But Candyman's a good choice too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I quivered when he showed up on screen for the first time in the parking garage, full, you could see him and everything.
Yeah.
I quivered a little. He's phenomenal in this movie. Yeah, Bob. When I told you what movie Brian had picked, what did you think?
I was I was like, oh, I'm sure this will be interesting. I don't know. That parking garage scene was in the top 100 scariest moments that we had watched.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Huh. Did
So-
I close my eyes during that
I
part?
don't know. I think you maybe just forgot about it.
That's fair.
But I was like, oh, this is interesting. Mostly because like I'm kind of fascinated by older horror, like just because movies have changed so much in the way that people make movies and the stylistic choices that are made. And horror as like a genre specifically is like something that's really trying to elicit a response. And so the way that movies in different eras go for that is very interesting to me. So I was definitely interested.
Yeah.
And that's like the cool thing about because like I mean the music's by Philip Glass, like very known like minimalist kind of composer, and like it's the soundtrack on this just has this very haunting, almost like kind of like Victorian feel kind of vibe to it, with the organs and the just the strings and everything and the chorus, and it really brings in this kind of like haunting feel.
Yeah. It is it's mostly a psychological thriller too. That's the thing I liked about it, because it gets lumped in there with a lot of the slasher movies, and especially at that point, 1992, slasher movies were on their way out. It wasn't until Scream came out in 96 that we saw a revival. And so it's curious to me that this gets lumped in with all the slashers. Like, it's got a killer with an iconic look, but to me it's like, I don't know, it's so much more than that. It doesn't feel like a schlocky slasher movie that we were getting from the genre at the time. Like, at that point we had 5 of the Halloween sequels. We had almost all of the Freddy sequels minus 1 or 2. Jason's definitely been to New York, if not also space at this point. And so what I love is just how separate this feels from all of that. And also a little bit of that, like, how similar to Hellraiser, how much of it is this killer, is this entity one thing, or is it a state of being? Is it a curse? What is it? And we haven't watched the new one yet, at least Bob and I haven't. And I'm definitely, it's been bumped up on my watch list now that I've seen the original, because I am curious, because I've heard things about how you said earlier, it could fit nicely in this universe in a way. And so I'm curious to see what that looks like now. So when was the first time you saw this, Brian?
It would have to be like at least, I think like 2 years ago I saw it.
Oh, okay.
And
Recent.
I would say like, I didn't really like, I was trying to like watch like the classics like Freddy and Halloween and all that kind of stuff.
I'm so sorry. You learned very quickly why that's a bad idea.
Yeah. And I tried watching them, and then Candyman kind of came up, and I was just kind of watching it. I think it was on HBO Max, and I was watching it there, and I just fell in love with this kind of Lovecraftian story being told, with the bees and like how he became this entity. It's just, he's just rumor, and like that, I thought that was such a cool concept. So
yeah. Well, I think that's the interesting thing too, is like, it's definitely, especially at the point the slasher genre was, there is a version of this movie that is hokey and playfully racist at best. Like there are so many ways that this being made in 1992 could have gone wrong. Yeah. And it feels like it didn't. It feels like a lot of it's talking about the social issues at the time, which are still relevant now, and especially the relationship between like white women and black communities, and white women going into black communities. And it was very interesting, because I kept waiting for the moment to make the joke of her being like, I've got a black friend, I'm not racist. There was one point where it really does feel like that, but for the most part it doesn't feel too she doesn't feel too disingenuous in what it is she's doing in the community.
That's the thing. Like, I think that that's the part I love, is that it's just so very, she's a genuine character, and it's not, she's not complete. I mean, she's the white savior, but but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's unearned, I guess.
Yeah, it's not as there's no point where there. So in this movie, we meet this woman that is, she's got her husband, but he's a professor. She's a grad student. He's clearly cheating on her. She's picking up on it, kind of thing, but they're skirting around it. And her colleague are researching urban myths, urban legends, and they start looking into the Candyman, which is this in Detroit or Chicago? Where's this set?
I'm not.
Should be in Illinois. They mentioned Illinois.
Okay, yeah.
They're,
So I
they're
imagine
Illinois University, so I think yeah.
Yeah, so it's them looking into this and looking into some recent murders. And what's interesting is we don't see the supernatural part of it outside of the urban legend told at the very beginning. We don't see any sort of supernatural element to this until I feel like an hour into the movie or so.
Yeah.
And so we're given all of the logical ways that, like, oh, this killer is a real person using this persona to, we even find someone that they, that takes on that mantle and is acting like that. And we're shown a lot of evidence that, like, oh no, this isn't real. And so what that leaves you with later on in the movie is a lot of doubt of, is there a Candyman, or is it just this character is blacking out and kind of a Jekyll Hyde situation, murdering these people and doing these things. And it keeps you on your toes in that regards. And so we follow this character as things get progressively worse for her. Bob, I'm curious, what was your oh fuck moment?
I mean, Doghead.
That's a good oh fuck moment.
Yeah, I mean, it did a good job escalating and adding more moments, but I think that one was like, oh, you killed the dog. Oh man, this is.
See, that's just a horror movie. See, to me, killing the dog's that's a gimme. That's like the free space and bingo in a horror movie kind of thing. Like, You're playing horror movie bingo. Something that happens that's bad in the movie that's a warning sign for things to come. Dead pet. Yeah, I thought they leave you dangling on, is that baby alive?
Yeah.
For so long. And then they like, that baby should not be alive.
Yeah.
I'm just putting that out there. What, I guess, which character dynamic was the most interesting to you guys?
I think I'd have to say that the relationship between the main character and Candyman, I think I would say. I think that it's complex, and like she kind of wants to be, she still wants to live and get through this and try to like power through it, but there's, I don't think, like, she wants to really power through it, and she doesn't want to just die, and then she turns into this kind of legend just like he does.
I think that there's definitely the thing that I find most interesting about Candyman is like his death is horrific, and then he goes on to do horrific things. And what is the mindscape? Because it's not just pure vengeance, because he kills people who aren't like oppressors. So that's,
well, he specifically goes for innocence. And I think it has to do more so with legacy for him than it does with, I mean, because he came, it is, his history is, was he a slave, or his father was a slave?
His father was a slave.
His father was a slave. So he's coming from, directly out of that generation. And in his instance, his family saw some success coming out of that. If I remember correctly, it wasn't like great means. It was basically like war profiteering during the Civil War, right? And so he was definitely, I think it has to do with legacy. I think that's drive to him. I don't think it's vengeance.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, is it's not. Usually it's some sort of story like this. It is vengeance.
Mhm.
And so it's the psychology of going through something that horrible and then becoming an urban legend, and that sort of like in people believing you live
Mhm.
is something I always find interesting in stories. It comes up in a lot of mythology about gods, is like gods are powered by belief, and if you don't have believers anymore, you
Mhm.
die. And that is sort of that's the thing I find interesting about this, is like you died, but you didn't actually die, and you need to be remembered because you shouldn't have died when you did.
Mhm.
And yeah, I find that very interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think that sort of relationship and like folklore, like when they started talking, like in the movie, the shitty husband was talking about the like folklore and stuff like that, and it gets you thinking about like other kind of folklore, and that's why I really like this story a lot, because it just, I think also I think the book gets more into like kind of a like I guess like a British kind of system where there's classes, and like it's more of a class struggle rather than kind of like it being rooted in slavery and then having that
Class
sort of-
versus race, because
Mhm.
yeah, English culture has a lot more focus on class. Like
Mhm.
class is a huge thing in pretty much every society, but Americans' obsession with race specifically is actually weirdly
Mhm.
Well, in the
unique to us.
application of class to race.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the execution is it's like, oh, we'll keep minority groups in the poorest situations and keep them in a position where, and that's it, again, 92, it's interesting seeing them talk a lot about the failures of policing in those communities, especially, but in general. There's one point where she is attacked by this wannabe Candyman and his gang, and she's taken to the police station, and they haven't been able to get this guy because nobody wants to step forward, because nobody from that community feels safe to do so.
Mm.
And so there's that layer of, is it this savior complex, or is it just, yeah, I just almost got killed in a bathroom
Yeah.
kind of thing. And like even this kid character is terrified of both the real Candyman and he believes this fake guy is the real Candyman.
Mhm.
And so it's really interesting to see how the urban myth kind of thing can permeate into a community and become fact in the same way, much like misinformation and stuff like that. And I think this movie handles that kind of beautifully and heartbreakingly.
Mhm.
This movie definitely ends on a well, it so it has kind of a what I would consider a stinger in most movies.
Mhm.
But outside of that, the ending is quite the bummer. Because our it's one of the few final girls I can think of in the first movie of a franchise where like the final girl dies,
Yeah.
and you don't get that a lot. If the final girl dies, it's always later in the franchise.
Yeah.
In Nightmare, it was 3 movies in. With Halloween, it wasn't until Resurrection,
Mhm.
and that's 3 different timelines or whatever. But like, so it's interesting to see. You just see the erosion of this person
Yeah.
before you, and then also know that the triumph comes in almost the same dark way
Yeah.
that it does for Candyman, but hers feels much more driven by vengeance.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, have you seen any of the sequels for this? Because I know there are 2 additional sequels, and then there's the reboot, right?
I mean, I've seen the just the brand new
Brand new
movie,
one.
yeah.
Okay.
And I saw that, and like I said, like it can kind of existence. It's pretty much like this, similar to the same beats, like like you said, the erosion of this person, because you have those beats where she kills the dog and then can't find the baby, and this is right after trying to like get some guy behind bars, and then just Bernadette, and then all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, and she goes through all of that, and I mean really just, I think just erodes away, just slowly but surely.
Yeah. It's definitely hard. It's hard to watch, and it's hard to watch too because it goes through like there's three I think deaths of her in this movie. There's that moment where she goes back to the apartment after escaping from the mental hospital, and she finds, is it Tony or Trevor or
Tyler. I think.
Tyler? Yeah, Tyler with her with his
Stacy.
Stacy's mom may not have it going on, but Stacy sure does. She also doesn't have
nipples.
I was gonna say what bras? Someone's bra gets covered in blood, and then there are no bras for the rest of the movie. They used up all the bras for that shot. And so you see that kind of her accepting that she's alone. There is no one. Everyone believes she did these heinous things, and the person that was supposed to help her, the person that she trusted and loved, even when she had doubts, has finally betrayed her. And then there's this kind of spiritual death that we get with her kind of accepting Candyman's offer of, I'll spare the child if you come with me, so to speak. And she returns to his lair, and we get this really intense, gross scene with the bees coming out of his mouth. And I know for a fact that, so there's in the wider shots where you can see both of them in the shot, it's a dummy of Tony Todd that has the bees coming out, but for the close-ups, that is Tony Todd with bees in his mouth.
Yep.
Yeah, the guy is a legend for a reason. he goes hard.
Yes, he was very excited about that. He's like, this is something no one's done. So like, put bees in my mouth.
Yeah, and such an interesting design too, because he's got this, colonial shirt collar. He's got this big long fur coat of, it almost feels kind of fantastical in its design. It doesn't really scream kind of like 70s like pimp coat or anything. It's fur. It's this dark brown color. Tony Todd just has such an imposing structure to his face, and also just in this movie specifically, the way he poises himself and the way his legs are spread is very interesting, which is why I find it very interesting towards the end. So during this kind of spiritual death we're talking about of her, he's taking the hook and going up her skirt with it. It's like, where's this going?
Yeah.
There was a scene where they kind of held on her in the bathtub for a little too long, and you get some nip action.
Yeah.
That felt unnecessary. That felt like we were just getting some boob to get boob. But yeah, and then we get the third death, which is the sacrificial death. This is the, she finally finds out where the baby is, where he's being kept, and she goes in to save him, and it's this bonfire pile that has been built up, earlier in the movie, and they see just her holding the hook, and they assume it's Candyman and catching on fire, and she dies saving the baby. And we get this lovely moment at the funeral where the people of that project specifically come and they pay their respects by dropping the burnt hand of Candyman, the hook, to kind of prove like she was innocent.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some beauty in that. And then there's the Clive Barker weird shit. I guess for you two, which of those stands out to you as the most poignant? Is it the spiritual death with the bees and that moment, or is it one of the others?
I mean, I like the moment. I like the first one where she realizes that the thing that she was suspecting is true, and she doesn't have anyone anymore. Because once you see someone who really has nothing to lose, that's when things get interesting. Because her like goading them with a phone.
Yeah.
And then that moment where she's like, what am I even doing? This actually means that I'm alone.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting. But they're all great. All great in their own way.
Yeah, I personally love the reveals of like the artwork, and then like the kind of catchphrasey kind of thing where like he has sweets to the sweet, which is, that like his kind of catchphrase, and then hers was, I think, like it was always you, Helen. I think that's one of the other ones. So it's kind of like I loved those kind of like pieces because they were all these like kind of panning in shots, and it just gorgeous with the soundtrack too.
It was always you, Helen, a reminder of white women's specific culpability
Mhm.
in the mechanisms of racism,
Mhm.
which is a thing that is important to be aware of
Hmm.
and work against.
Yeah, bud.
Yeah.
Not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good job. Proud of you. Way to go. Let me get you a gold star.
Please don't.
Yeah,
Also, the thing about how she's talking about how her building was built to be projects, and then they were essentially like, this view is too nice
Mhm.
for all of these poor people of color.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like,
yeah, and every detail in this movie is really it's a very detail-oriented movie.
Mhm.
There is nothing entirely out of like. There's obviously her; she gets put out of place a lot in this movie. But like, as far as the details go, like everything is so convincing. Of Helen she didn't do this.
Mhm.
Everything is so convincing to us, the audience, given all the details. But also from the outside perspective, if you just look at all of the facts of the situation, if you look at the fact that behind these mirrors in these apartment buildings are whole other rooms where people could clearly sneak in there, and like you just look at the structure of everything, it's like, yeah, someone's clearly, this is a person, this is a human doing these things, and Helen keeps showing up in this situation. And so I love the movie's commitment to detail in a way that serves the narrative and not just is packed with detail to be packed with it. It's a very pointed and specific movie, which is I think very far cry from like Hellraiser,
Yeah.
which is all over the place and a bonkers movie and franchise in general. Yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
special shout out to the makeup department for making Bernadette purple in Death. There's been a lot of, this is an interesting art thing that I just know from black artists being like, hey, if you have an undead black character, here's how to make their skin look right and not just make a purple gray wash over them. It was like a horrific thing to see her, because she was a perfectly lovely person and she shouldn't have been in there.
Yeah.
And then the tiniest bit of my brain is just like, why is she purple? It was just, oh, if I was a George Lucas changing things, I would just color correct the frames. That's the only thing I can think of to change for this movie. It's just like, make her look don't make her look actually dead and not like an it was the only thing. It's my only criticism.
That's your only criticism?
It's my only criticism of this movie.
I never noticed that. I guess I'm just colorblind. I can't really like see it, and I'm
Brian's like, ah, yes, that's what that should look like.
yes.
We watched the color corrected version of the movie. Yeah, and the movie's cinematography is interesting because it is, gosh, it's shot in such a way where like there's the concept of liminal spaces, which has seen some recent popularity in things like Reddit threads, and the Backrooms is kind of the most popular mainstream example of that. And it's this big, it's a space that feels familiar, yet it is completely empty and void of comfort, kind of thing, but yet looks like it should have comfort.
Yeah.
And this movie has a lot of that, especially in the big sweeping shots of like the quad at the school and outside the projects, approaching like the bathroom and stuff. And
yeah.
it's very like, you're like, where are all the people?
Yeah.
Where did they go?
I think that, and like, that's a really cool thing. Cause you know, how to do that with a shot that's like outside and keep it feeling lonely. It's just the way, like, the music went and the way the shot just looked like this little island, you know?
Well, and the majority of the film is broad daylight. That's the other thing that's fascinating to me. That it's not super common in this era of horror films, or really horror films in general, for them to be mostly in daylight.
Mhm.
And I love that because it really, like, our main character is introduced to Candyman in broad daylight in a parking garage in this very open space. There aren't these tight corners to hide him around. He's not all the jump scares in this movie didn't come from Candyman. They came from things like the dog barking or someone slamming a door open or
Her
climbing through
popping
the
back
mirror.
in through the mirror, yeah.
Yeah, but he's a very poised entity, and it's very interesting. I'm kind of really in love with his look and his design, but also his mannerisms, his actions, how he moves about the world is so unique compared to. It's kind of like how Ghostface is very unique in that way, where he's always kind of clumsily flailing around and like tripping over furniture and stuff. And Freddy is always kind of like moving with like a heavier hand because the claw is implied to be really heavy.
Yeah.
It's that same thing of like, it's such an iconic movement through the scene and through the world that some of these characters don't have, like Michael or Jason. They kind of lumber around like big guys.
He has a different kind of gait. He kind of just like not lumbers, but just slowly kind of
Glides.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's being pulled half the time, like he's not actually moving his feet. And the other thing too is he's one of the few like of those iconic, what are listed as like the top 10 iconic slashers, right? He's one of the few, well, he's one of the only ones that I can think of that he can talk, but he's not funny or witty or quick-witted. He's not, the closest I would say is maybe Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs, but even then he's still a bit eccentric and will make jokes at the expense of the victims or whatever. But this character is so he's just so driven in what he's doing, and it's not. It would feel weird if they tried to make him like a Freddy or a Chucky or a Ghostface type character where it's kind of more humor driven, which I appreciated. I think what else really stood out. Oh, well, then we have the actual ending of this movie, which is Tyler, her ex-husband at this point, her widowed husband.
He was
a widower.
Yeah, he was not sad. Well, he was sad, but
he realizes what he lost.
Yeah,
which I think is really interesting and really telling, because it tells me, because you should have realized it when you had it.
Yeah.
Should have never gotten yourself in a situation where this became the thing.
Yeah.
There are so many steps along the way that he could have prevented some of this from happening. And I liked how they started this scene, and then or his delivery. So he's in the bathroom, he's upset, and he starts, he's in the mirror kind of looking at himself in shame and guilt and frustration, and he starts saying Helen's name. And I really love that they were ramping it up in almost a very natural way. But there was this moment, and I don't know if it was the actor's decision or if it was the director's instruction, to kind of shift to like, it almost went from like that natural, like Helen, like, I'm so sorry, Helen, like, to more of a testing the waters kind of approach, where it's like, Helen, like he's saying Beetlejuice. Like, and so that threw that scene a little bit for me, but I love that execution of like being distraught, calling out this name, and us being introduced to Helen as this similar like Candyman type entity.
It kind of sounds like he's like just committing to it. I think like I always wondered, like, I think does he feel guilty, and he's just like
like, I deserve this, or was it supposed to be read as he's just calling out this name out of the frustration, and it has nothing to do with wanting to be held accountable. Because let's face it, he was not a type of person that would have wanted to have been held accountable for his actions. So it's heartbreaking. It's just a really and like Helen's just one of those characters that you can get behind. Like, there are very few moments. I did make the joke while we were watching. I'm like, I've never, in the race to see who the dumbest horror movie character is, she's really leading the pack. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, these are dumb decisions, but the plot has to move forward.
Mhm.
It never feels like she's never making malicious decisions,
Mhm.
Right.
which is I think that oftentimes they'll make the characters in these movies more colder or malicious in their intent so that, you can get away with killing them. And I always like when these movies take a character who is, for the most part, purely innocent
Mhm.
and put them through the ringer in a way. We just watched the second season of Chucky, and they did that with a character named Nadine,
Mhm.
which was interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Cool. Yeah.
The moment she steps out of his mouth painting. Very, very good.
Yeah. good
Just
shot.
as far as iconic shots, just like her stepping out of his mouth into the
Yeah.
room is like, ooh.
Yeah. I think also just like any of the graffiti, the streets, like Sweets to the Sweet.
Mhm. Can we talk about the random ass pile of candy that was placed in this movie to justify the fucking name? I want to take a moment to just acknowledge the fact that the only reason that pile of candies with razor blades in it is A, because that was the height of the, oh my god, strangers are putting razors. Nobody's giving away good razor blades to kids and candy. No, they're not. It's the same thing as like, oh, they're gonna sell weed to the kid. No one's just giving away their weed to the no. But it's like everything else because it focuses on the honey,
Mhm.
which is where you get that sweet element, which I'm like, okay, perfect. And then there's that just random pile of candy that's like, hey, remember his name's Candyman? Get it, guys?
Yeah.
Fucking get it? And it just felt a little like God, I wonder if that was a producer's decision kind of thing. I wonder if that shows up in the original text of was it the Forbidden?
Yeah, the Forbidden.
Yeah.
I don't think it does, but I have to.
Yeah, like it feels so like just on the nose of like, well, we keep calling him Candyman. I wonder why. We've described his backstory and there's nothing about candy in here.
But you have to kind of like admit like that was, I think, more of a thing of the time. I think
Absolutely.
it was definitely nobody pulled them aside and went, that's fucking stupid.
There was no cinema sins going, what? Yeah. I think it definitely is. It's not like it's too, you know what it is? It's a very bright flash of color in a very dark space because it shows up in his lair, or at least the first level of his lair.
Yeah.
Which I love the design of his, that whole just, it's a maze of a building.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And it makes you really feel like claustrophobic, especially when she gets into the like his lair, like you said, and it just feels, and that's like we were talking about like liminal spaces, just how lonely that little like room feels.
Yeah,
it's so like it's honestly one of the scariest kind of feelings. It just feels so lonely.
Yeah. Well, and then the also the set design of the pile of rubbish and stuff outside for the bonfire, and just the interior of that being so claustrophobic. And yeah, they played off of each other so well. Their chemistry, so to speak, was very fascinating. Yeah, I'm really excited to see the 2021 one. I also want to check out the sequels to this and see how bonkers they go, because like Tony Todd's in those sequels, so clearly they go back to him, which is kind of a bummer given how this movie ends.
Yeah.
It also makes me want to watch the new Hellraiser on Hulu, the reboot that they did, because that has played a little more true to Clive Barker's original book.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm like I want to explore that because I feel like it could land very similarly to this, just given the fact of the angle they went with it. So, yeah. Any closing thoughts on Candyman?
Thank you for bringing this movie to us, Brian.
Yeah.
Sure.
Next time you can bring another movie. Maybe another movie.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah, that's how that works. That's how that works.
Okay.
Yeah. Brian, it's the end of the show.
Okay.
Do you have anything that you want people to know about? And when I say people, hi, all 30 of you.
Well, I don't really have much going on with Winchester Ghost now. We just added a 5th player to our band. Mr. Evan Reichenfeld. Pretty awesome dude.
Friend of the podcast.
Yeah. Ooh. And he plays keys, and he's gonna also add an extra guitar to us. So we're kind of working that out, trying to get a gig. So, but if you want to listen to our stuff, we're on Spotify and Apple Music and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What's your guys' website?
WinchesterGhost.com.
And that will be, if you're watching the video version, bottom of the screen, and also in the description everywhere. You can also check us out occasionally doing stuff together at Arcade Comedy Theater. We kind of took over the theater last weekend, 2 weekends ago. That was a lot of fun. And you can, Bob, you can find Bob. Bob, can they find you? Do you wear wigs?
I am impossible. I know I have not.
You're a beautiful man.
Beautiful man. When will you wear wigs? A small frog art on various platforms. Instagram is where I'm most active. It cross posts to Facebook though, so if you're not an Instagrammer, that's fine.
Hey, Instagrammers and other
Instagrammers and Instagram dads.
No, I'm an Instagram daddy. You can find us at www.thebutchandtheby.com. That's A&D, not ampersand, because the internet does not like ampersands. And you can find all our social media links, all that stuff. If you're watching the video version and you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel, as it would mean a lot. And if you haven't checked out the video version yet, do so, because work gets put into it. As Brian noted, there's lighting, and that's impressive, I think.
And props.
And props. And Brian. He's now gonna be in the background of every
You need to get a
episode.
cardboard cutout.
Oh, I'm just gonna
Just like
Photoshop
this.
him in. Yeah. Track. Oh, we'll get one of those fat head stickers to put on the wall. I had stuff to put on the wall, but we'll just put a big old sticker of you on the back. It'll be like you're here all the time. And we can acknowledge you when we go to the bathroom, which is right across from us. Great. Thanks everybody. Bye.
Butch.
Bye.
Bry, Butch. It's so easy. We did a podcast together. Oh yeah, go track that down on YouTube. That's what do we call that?
What do you mean you haven't seen?
Yep. Yeah.
Which is kind of what we're doing with bringing guests on now.
It really is. It's very funny. I was talking to Mandy the other day, because me and her had a movie-based podcast called From a Friend's Perspective. Look, the first year of podcasting, I went hard when I really didn't need to. But it is funny that our show has kind of rolled in everything at this point. Yeah. Okay, we did it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Butch.
Bye. Bye.